Hi and welcome back to part 12. In this part we're going to be dealing with the glass ornament on the windowsill there. So we're in items mode. We're going to select the ornament, and here's the abstract sculpture material with the basic default material within. Nothing strange there. First thing we're going to do, we're going to just tweak this material a bit first. Diffuse, as this is just going to be glass, I'm just going to cut this down to 0. The colour, I'm going to make it white. I'm going to turn conserve energy on. Specular amount, I'm going to bring it down a little wee bit, and the finale I'm going to put up to 50. The specular colour, I'm going to give it a yellowy. I'm going to give it yellowy colour. Reflection amount, 10% for now, and then for the reflect colour, I'm going to give it the same. Okay, so that's basically our diffuse type stuff done. Right, on the material, on the transparency amount, I'm going to put up to, we're going to try 100%. And this is going to be we're going to try and get a gradient in here to sort of blend some of the colours together. So I'm going to put the transparency amount, I'm going to put it, instead of yellow, I'm going to go to maybe the other end of the spectrum here and give it a bluey type, purpley type colour. This is just me stabbing in the dark here. This is not, if this comes out horribly pear-shaped, then we'll know why. Absorption distance. If you want to see what these things mean, the best thing I can do, if I show you, I'll just I'm off camera here, so just bear with me a minute. I'll bring up the Modo Help, and okay, so this is the I hope you can see this if I try and shrink it down a bit. Okay, so if you go to the Modo Help here, and we're into materials, and this will give you a good breakdown of all the different settings, and it also gives you like visual descriptions of what they do. Like if you set the specular amount to 100, the light shadow, light reflection, a lot of that, as opposed to a diffuse. And it tells you about the reflection amount, what happens when you change the finale, roughness values. So this is a really good resource, really. You'll be surprised. Transparency colours, absorption. Some of the things we're going to talk about now, like absorption distance, I'm not going to explain them because you can just come here and it gives you a visual. For me, to try and tell you what it means is just me stabbing in the dark. But to actually come here to this sort of help and just see them visually, it automatically sort of hits home on what the settings are, and they give you these sort of settings. So I suggest you just check that out. Okay, so we're going to bang on here. So based on those things you've just seen, the help, the absorption distance, I'm going to set this to about 2 inches. The refractive index, you can get this off the internet. If you Google refractive index, that'll tell you what the setting is for glass and sort of topaz and diamond and water and air and such like. Dispersion, I'm going to put this at 0.05. That's based on those settings we saw. Refractive roughness is 1. I'm going to boost up the rays only a wee bit. Okay, so you can see a right sort of cacophony of different colours appearing here now. So this is just like an abstract sculpture. So it's, the more weird and wonderful we make this, the better. I'm also going to add a gradient onto here. It's under processing. It might be off the screen capture here, but if you go down to processing, you can select gradient. The input value is going to be the incident angle. That's what I've said before in one of the previous videos. The angle of the face, whether it's facing towards the camera or if it's at, like perpendicular at 90 degrees. So we're going to edit the gradient, and this is the gradient editor. We haven't really talked too much about this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this to about, so this is the input amount here, so I'm going to go just short of 100%. You can scroll this around the same as you do the viewports in Modo. The Alt key to sort of move, and Alt and Control to the zoom, etc. And then the channels you can just select here. So I'm going to do the red channel first. If you want to add a node, you just hit the middle mouse button. So I'm going to put this, if you click on it, that'll tell you what the value is. So at 94% of the instant angle, the value is going to be a 1. So I'm going to drag that down a bit. I don't know, maybe to there. This is just another sort of trial now. And here I'm just going to middle click and just add another node here. So when the value is at basically 0, I'm going to pull this down. And then if you want, you can just hit the A key, and that'll then sort of zoom in to the extent of what you're looking at. Same with the green. This value is at 1, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to blend this maybe to the middle there. And then the blue. So I'm going to do the other way. I'm going to start this at 1. And let's pull this one down this side. So I've got that. Okay, so I'm going to close that off. And that's now going to... this is basically working on the diffuse colour and the instant angle. So the problem is, as soon as you start adding transparent materials, things are going to slow down to a grind. So we're going to leave that go, and there's nothing we can do about that. Like I normally do, I'll render at the end of this scene, and I'll stick the image in the image directory you've got there. Also, what we'll do in this part, we'll do the exterior. So outside we're going to have like a panoramic view. So if I go over to the there's the scene. So at the moment, through the window, there's nothing there. It's just basically a sort of a creamy white light coming in. So we're going to add a scene outside. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to the model view quickly, and items, and I've added another mesh layer here, which I'm going to call outside, and all it is a plane. So I just hit the create a cube box, dragged it out, hit spacebar, drop the tool, and there it is. And I've basically scaled it so it's roughly the same size. It's slightly bigger than the opening, just so if the camera does happen to be over here, you can still see it. So it depends on when we do the final renders where we move the camera to. We may have to extend this or shorten it. I also just created a UV map called outside, and within the UV map I just basically went to the front view, so I'm seeing the plane. Let's try and see that one there, and just did project from view and clicked on the viewport and made the plane. And then in the shader tree we'll do filter on selection, items, let's go back over to the render tab. There's my plane. There's no material yet. Okay, so in polygons, got the plane selected. I'll hit the M key. I'll give it the name outside. So this is my close-up camera, so I'm just going to move that back into the scene. I think the plane outside is going to have to be a wee bit bigger, but we'll leave it like that for now. Okay, so what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to add another layer, load image, and within the additional textures I'll give you an image called landscape. we're just going to load that onto that plane. And it's basically just a sort of a rolling panorama of some hills, and there's a tree up here and nothing too drastic. So within the image layer, we're going to turn off the anti-aliasing as we always do. And in the material, I'm going to bump the diffuse up to 100. I'm going to turn off any specular, make sure any reflections off. The only issue and this is basically that done. The only issue you're going to have with this is if you look in the scene itself, the light up here for the sun is going to come down here. That's going to clip this plane. Well, it shouldn't do too bad because the face is on one side, but it could, in some instances, clip the plane, especially if you had a curved panorama, and then cast a shadow in your scene, which obviously is not what you want. You want this just for visual effect, not for casting any sort of ray tracing shadows. So what we're going to have to do, we're going to add, in this case we'll probably be alright, but it's good practice to do it. We're going to add a new shader, because if you go up to the base shader, we want to basically be able to turn cast shadows and receive shadows off, but we don't want to overwrite all the materials below it. So what I'm going to do, within my outside, I'm just going to add a shader in here and turn off the shadows, cast and receive, and then basically what I'm going to do then, I'm going to turn off filter on selection and just drag this above the base shader like so, and that'll basically now use its own shader. The ones below the base shader, my normal materials, will use these settings, and the ones above will use their own shader. So that's my exterior scene. The only other thing we have to do here for this now, which I noticed before actually when I was doing a final render, is the mirror here. It's blown out and it's you can't see a reflection of anything here anyway. It's just a plain white light. So what you need to do is, if you go over to items, filter on selection, find the mirror, and just turn off the conserve energy, and that'll fix that little issue there. So that's the end of this part. We've done two things in this one. So what I'll do now, I'll do a render, and then when we come back in the next part, we're getting nearly done, to be honest now. I was going to look at the plants, but to be honest, they're just models which are dragged straight from the Modo presets. So what I might do is just use the material, because these are actually textured and materialed and surfaced already as part of the assets. So I think for the scope of this beginner's surfacing, I'm just going to bring them back in as they are from the Modo presets. And when we come back next part, we'll make sure there's nothing else left to do. There's the ceiling light still to do, which is a different sort of material type, which run along the top here. That's not so important for this scene because this is a daylight scene, but that'll add a bit more light into the scene, and that'll be handy if you ever want to do a night shot, a night render. So we'll do that, and then we'll move straight on to the final render and the post-processing. So when you come back in the next part, I'll show this final render plus these plants dragged back in with its preset materials on. So I'll see you for that. So back in a moment.